Hi, it's Mr. Baumgarten here with a video to look at exceptions in Java. An exception is effectively a runtime error that occurs in your program. So it's an error that occurs that the compiler cannot necessarily anticipate ahead of time. It's something that happens during the execution, the runtime of your program. And to illustrate this, I have here a simple example of a program that is reading in two strings. So string 1 here, string 2 here, and it's going to perform a division calculation. So first we convert the string into an integer, convert the second string into an integer, and then we do a division operation and print out the result. A fairly straightforward little program, but there's a few points where this could go wrong. The first is if what the user types in when the scanner reads the next line, if it's not something that can be turned into an integer. So if this parse int operation was to fail, that would cause our program to crash. The second place where this program could go wrong is if our denominator is 0. Well, we cannot divide by 0, and that is also going to cause our program to fail or crash. So if I quickly run this and demonstrate what happens, if I was to say 20 instead of typing the 2 and 0 to represent 20, 20 and 1, whatever, right, we get exception in thread main Java lang number format exception for input string 20. And so this is telling us we had an exception of type number format exception, and that occurred when here on line 12, right, which is when we tried to turn the string into an integer. The second type of error, if I was to give it valid numbers but then try to get it to divide by 0, we will also get an exception in thread main of an arithmetic exception, trying to do a divide by 0, and that happens on line 15, which is here. So how can we use exception handling to deal with this? So exceptions are errors that happen during runtime that can be anticipated as possible or likely by the programmer. And there are times where certain Java functions will require you to use exception handling because the language itself realizes that there is a possibility for an error here. And a good example of that is if you are using file handling, because any reading or writing to the disk can be prone to errors such as if the disk is full or the file you try to open doesn't exist, that kind of thing. So the way we do this is it's using what's known as a try and catch block. And so we use the keyword try, and we open up a new block using the curly braces. And I'm going to cut this code here and paste it into that catch block. Let's just indent to put it in there. And you can see here we've got the little red underline happening here. The editor knows that there is something else required. And so I'm going to put in the word catch, and inside catch, I'm going to give it some parentheses and put the word exception with an E and give it another block. Inside here, I will just put system out print line and error occurred. That'll do for now. So literally what is going on here is, as it reads, we are asking Java to try doing this. And if at any point here you generate an error, then Java is going to jump down to the exception, to the catch block. So if this passes, that's great. If it has an error, it won't even attempt the rest of that code. It'll jump straight down to here. Right? And if it passes through this, and then has an error here, it's not going to attempt to print anything. It'll skip all remaining lines and jump down to the exception. So let's just demonstrate what this does. All right, so if I type in 21, all right, an error occurred. We still did the 1 because both scanner inputs are occurring before the try block, and it's only when we try to then pass them to integers that we caused the exception to occur. Likewise, if I gave it valid numbers but used a 0, we'll get the same error occurred. But if what we do does not generate any error, our program will just carry on as normal. All right, so this is helpful, but it's not ideal. In a better world, what we want to be able to do is respond differently to the error based upon what actually went on. Now, this exception E is exception is an object type. It's a class, and so we are instantiating an object called E, which we could print out or access different parts of. And so, for instance, if I was to use E dot, you can see here that there are a few options that appear. And so I could use the get message, and that would tell me a little bit about what happened. All right, so now if I just type 20, whatever. All right, an error occurred, excuse me, for input string 20. There is other information that we can use here. Let's just run the toString on this and see what that gives us. All right, and that gives us the full error line that would have ordinarily been printed when the program crashes. All right, but even better is if we can customize our catch exception response based upon the type of error that occurred. And that's where if you generated the error, and you remember that I highlighted when we were trying to convert the string to an integer, it said it was a number format exception. And when we tried to divide by 0, it said it was a java.lang.arithmetic exception. So we can actually customize our catch blocks according to the different types of error. So rather than it just being a generic exception here, I can say I want to catch the number format exception and say here you didn't type a number. Right, and then alternatively, I want to catch an arithmetic exception. And here I can say system out print line. I can't divide by 0. And let's make sure I actually use the word out, not our. Right, and now what will happen is any other type of error will still cause my program to crash, which is probably what I actually want, because it means it's not an error that I'm anticipating. So when I just had the generic thing that just said exception, if there was some other kind of error that I wasn't able to foresee, it still would have just run the exception handler, and it may not then behave quite the way that I'm expecting. Whereas now, okay, I'm getting the error, I'm handling that error in a particular way that I have specified for Java, and when I give it valid numbers but I can't divide by 0, I get my particular error handler that I want there. And so perhaps I anticipate that I might type in something that can't be turned into a string, but I might not realize that there's the possibility of dividing by 0. So my handler would work for I didn't type a number, but if I then did type numbers and caused it to divide by 0 right now, it will do a proper crash. And so then that will alert me to the fact that I actually need to go back and fix my code and deal with the other possible errors. So that's a little bit about exception handling there with Java. This has been Mr. Baumgarten, signing out.